Hello friends, welcome to Friday Beyond Spotlights, Hong Kong's new insightful program looking into the lives of our most remarkable high achievers and getting their take on the city's past, present and future.
Our guests will give their personal perspectives for a new generation, inspiring Hong Kong for a better society.
So sit back and relax and we'll take you beyond the spotlights.
Welcome to Friday Beyond Spotlights, where we invite leading minds and game changers with incomparable experience and unique knowledge to come on our light-hearted yet informative show to help business leaders and the wider community gain insights, grasp opportunities, and see behind and beyond spotlights so we can get the full picture, dream bigger, and achieve more together. I am your host for this episode. My name is Nick Chan, lawyer and lawmaker. And Friday Beyond Spotlights is honored and pleased to present to you our guest today, Maria Tam, GBM, GBS, CBE, JP, a barrister and Deputy Director of the Hong Kong Basic Law Committee of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress. Maria, welcome on the show.
Thanks for having me.
We will be talking about one country, two systems, past, present, and future today.
Okay, I'll try my best.
So who created one country, two systems?
One country, two systems originally was meant for Taiwan. Reunification of China, it's it's a national longing. So when it first started, it was in the 1970s. And in 1972 onwards, the Chinese government has been announcing how to resolve the Taiwan problem. And it comes out with one country, two systems. That is, one country is one China, but you can have your own lifestyle and systems. But Hong Kong became the pioneer because in 1997, the deadline in respect of the Free and Equal Treaty would expire vis-a-vis about 80% of Hong Kong's territory.
When did you find out the British decided to retreat from its occupation of Hong Kong?
There were early signs which I wasn't knowledgeable enough to read. Actually, when 1979, Sir Mary McLaughlin went up to Beijing and met Mr. Deng Xiaoping, he already received the message that China is going to take back Hong Kong lock, stock, and barrel. So he came back and he started representative government in the grassroots level, in the lower rungs. And a lot of people who are knowledgeable in politics at that time already thought that perhaps the British are withdrawing.
What power did the governor have before 1997?
Okay, he represents the Queen. According to the latest pattern and royal instruction, he is the governor and he is also the chief commander of the British force in Hong Kong. The governor will have two votes, one as a member of LegCo and one as the chairman. President, the casting vote. And he appoints all the members of his cabinet and the legislative council. And therefore, he has total administrative power and also the backing of the British force.
Wow. And
I should say there was no democracy then.
So any check and balances with the so-called free powers?
Check and balances, very little. When I was appointed to the Legislative Council in 1982, there was no elected members. We were all appointed.
Wow.
Yeah, so no check and balance. And then in 1985, one of the local politicians who has close contact with China approached me and said, would you like to draft the basic law? So what happened is that I started to draft the basic law in 1985, 1st July, and all the way to 1990, April. The basic law is a national law. It's enacted by the NPC and prescribes what is one country, two systems.
Can I ask, in the basic law, are there salient features, particular sections that laid out the groundwork for, democracy or more democracy, given what you shared with us before 1997?
When the British was running Hong Kong, I think in 1976, around that time, They joined the International Covenant on Political Rights, and they reserve Article 25B in that treaty, which says that a place can have a universal suffrage election, which means that in Hong Kong, under the British rule, we do not have universal suffrage. Universal suffrage is given to us by China. When we wrote the Basic Law, we wrote in Article 45 that the Chief Executive will ultimately be nominated by a broad representative committee, and 2 or 3 candidates will be nominated, and they would be elected by universal suffrage by the Hong Kong people. And I must say, the voters in Hong Kong, you don't have to be a Chinese citizen. The voters in Hong Kong, if you got a right to vote here, you may be a Caucasian, you may be an American. You can still vote in Hong Kong, which is
That's unusual,
freer
right?
than anybody else, anywhere else in the world. For the legislature, we wrote in Article 68 that ultimately the whole legislature will be elected by universal suffrage.
So after 1997, we didn't just swap a governor appointed by the UK with a chief executive appointed by Beijing.
Our chief executive is not appointed by Beijing. We are elected here.
It is important to note that before 1997, the governor was appointed from the UK with no democratic process. The Sino-UK Joint Declaration did not even mention universal suffrage. And even in democracies like the USA, UK and Japan, the head of state is not elected by popular vote.
For sure. Thanks to Maria, I now understand that the HKSAR and the Basic Law were created by China's National People's Congress. And Article 45 has set out that only candidates nominated by the broadly representative nominating committee can participate in the chief executive's election.
Another thing we have to deal with is, who has the ultimate authority to interpret the Basic Law. Because it is a national law of China, then the Standing Committee, according to our Constitution, has the ultimate authority to its interpretation. At the same time, we have the Court of Final Appeal in Hong Kong, and under the common law system, it's judicial interpretation, and the CFA should have the final say. So we are looking at a situation when you have 110 voltage of electricity power on one side and 220 on the other.
Right.
And we had to look for a transformer. So we looked around, and finally we found it in the European community. In the 1980s, Britain was still a member. So they practiced common law, and the rest of the continental European countries use continental law. But when you have a clause in any European community law, which has to be applicable to all the member states,
That makes sense.
yes, then before you come to final adjudication in the place where the case was happening, you would bring that particular clause in that European law to the European Court in Luxembourg and ask for interpretation. And then you will follow that interpretation in application to your judgment. So all the member states in respect of that particular clause in that particular law will be uniform, will be standard. This would avoid a lot of conflicts. So we follow that, and what happened is in Article 158 of the Basic Law, we write, firstly, the right to interpretation is in the hand of the Standing Committee, but, second clause, courts can interpret the whole of the Basic Law. But if it comes to articles which is within the power of the central government, for example, the appointment of the chief executive, or it concerns the interaction between the central government and the local government, for example, Hong Kong laws being registered with the central government, then if there should be any dispute in respect of this type of clauses, you would first, before the Court of Final Appeal, make the judgment, take this particular issue to the Standing Committee and ask for interpretation. And if they do make an interpretation, then the CFA will follow it, and it becomes a precedent in Hong Kong.
And if one country, two systems can work in one country, it probably can work for the rest of the world.
Well, it's worked very well with Hong Kong. And I think time will prove that this would be the situation even for years that follows. This is where East meets West. And in terms of law and order, according to the World Justice Project, we rank number 16 in the world. And in terms of freedom in the way we live and the way we conduct our business, the Fraser Institute has ranked us for over 10 years as the freest economy in the world. And particularly, they think our regulatory system and the sort of regulation in terms of free trade is top of the world.
Let's look at these statistics.
So there's no basis to, stop a business from acquiring, companies in Hong Kong or just normally doing business in Hong Kong.
No problem whatsoever.
Thank you. And we'll be back for more.